And we are live here to chat about what we watched this week. I am very excited because our highs are very high, our lows are very low, and I have two guests this week, and I'm pretty thrilled about it. Let me go ahead and first bring on Carey to say hi. Hold on. Let me do some magic to bring Carey in this way. Here he is. Carey, thank you for joining us to talk me off the ledge when it comes to Flash this week.
I certainly appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled Carey was going to be here. It was implied that he was coming, but let me tell you, the very first thing I did after watching the Flash episode, other than like probably having a drink, was messaging Carey and being like, "Hey, smiley face emoji, you're definitely going to be there, right? Like you will join me."
Now, without giving too much away, I absolutely loved the episode. Obviously, there were a couple nitpicks here and there, but I really dug it.
That is music to my ears because that is what I want. I want to be brought back from the cold dark heart that I have and be brought to see the light. Now on the other side of the spectrum, somebody who did not watch The Flash and would probably share my general disdain, but maybe Carey and I can convince her to watch next week when Miss Mia Smoke Queen appears. We have Kate joining us this week. Hello, Kate.
Hi. Yeah, probably not going to happen. I might watch a clip from Mia, but I probably won't watch the entire thing.
Well, you should at least watch the promo for next week because I will say Mia is featured very heavily in the promo. I just realized right this second, I can't even tell you how many windows I have open in front of me. I just realized just this second that I am just now posting the tweet that has to do with this thing. But we are live. We've been live. And the promo for this thing features Mia very heavily. It features her wearing Felicity Smoke's engagement ring. It features her in the green dress. There's some ammunition we can use to try to get you to watch. But first, Kate, the news. We've been skipping the news. We've been doing the news out of order, and we're going to bring order back into this world. Talk to us about the news. And if there's any news that's specific to Carey, let me know and I'll bring him in on the video instead of myself. But go ahead.
You see, the week we remember to do the news is the week that there's really no news. So I can reiterate what I said last week, but other than that, I have nothing new for us. There's not a lot of announcements on the TV in the spectrum, at least coming down my way. So Mrs. Maisel is coming out on February 18th for season 4, and Bridgerton has wrapped filming, and we have confirmed at least 4 seasons of that. Yay!
We'll very exciting.
If it stays good quality that long. I think it will, but
I also saw some pictures from the set of Only Murders in the Building season 2. So that is back up and running. Very excited about that. And I also saw some, I think it was Critics' Choice Award nominations or something going around. And I saw that Selena Gomez for Only Murders in the Building and Elizabeth for WandaVision both got nominated for like limited series, best actress, whatever, both of which well-deserved nominations.
Yeah. On the nominations front, there's been a lot of nominations and awards won already for Alana Haim on her debut for Licorice Pizza, so I'm really excited to see that movie.
I'm excited to see that as well. I was also really excited to watch Hawkeye, and so excited in fact that it made the thumbnail even in the middle of Flash crossover, and I actually marathoned through all 4 episodes in the span of about 48 hours. So I'm going to start by touching on something you said, and then I'm going to bring on Carey as well to talk with us. I can only have 2 video feeds at a time, so there's sort of this a bit of Tetris that I'm doing here. But you had referenced it as somewhat Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.-esque, and in the beginning, I didn't get it at all. And I was like looking for it and I was like, where is she getting Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. vibe? This feels like the opposite of Ensemble. And then somewhere towards the end of second episode, it just clicked where it was like, that's not about screen time. It's about like the number of players that they're bringing in. And even the way, like, this is going to sound really weird and morbid, but even the way they refer to the dead very much invokes like a Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. feel. So I wanted to check with you, and then I'm going to pull on Carey. What's your rating for this latest episode? What did you think of it?
It's still kind of, that one, it felt very much as a setup, but it also did a lot of really good, like rehoning in on the themes that we're really trying to focus in with these two characters. I'd say it was a good like 8 out of 10. There were some moments where it did drag out a little bit. I think the tension between her and her family is a little bit slow, and like it's very predictable where it's going, but it's kind of, I think they're trying to fast track introducing her backstory and getting her involved faster, and are kind of trying to give her family connections for later character dynamics, but really are trying to more focus on how she relates to Hawkeye, how she views his work, the Avengers work, and her learning from him, and truly learning, even though a lot of times it does seem like she's just joking around.
Yeah, I think that they're really building, and there's like just a few ominous things to me. One of which is the casting of what's her name, who was on Bates Motel and like a bunch of other things as Kate's mom. Like something about the way she plays this character is extremely ominous to me, and I feel like there's going to be something massive that will come from that that's not already there. But I'm not familiar enough to with the comics to actually like know who everybody is other than Kate Bishop. So let me bring on Carey. Carey, what did you think of this latest episode? And also, do you have a sense of what's coming? And if so, do you have like comic book knowledge or just from like reading these characters?
All right. First thing I guess I would say is if I were to give this episode a rating out of 10, 8.5 feels about right for me.
Okay.
And I do think it's interesting that you picked up on, because I picked up on it too, right? Sort of the ominous nature of her name's Eleanor, actually, Kate's mom.
Eleanor, okay.
And yeah, and for a couple of episodes, I had this feeling that, okay, she's being played, she's being duped by this Jack guy, and like the truth's going to come out and it's going to like shake her somehow. I felt that like maybe in episode 1, maybe part of episode 2, but as it's gone on, I'm getting the impression that this reveal, or at least my expectation that this reveal of Jack being like mine, won't come as a shock or a surprise to Eleanor, and that she has some significant role perhaps in sort of the criminal underground or the criminal world, even though she's part of this organization that's supposed to be stopping this out or at least exposing it. I think they're just sort of playing her in a mysterious way. And I didn't necessarily get that from like the first episode, but as it's gone on, it's sort of like, yeah, I don't think she's being duped by this Jack guy, as Kate probably feels like she is.
Right. I feel the exact same way. And I happen to have the superpower to be able to see both you and Kate at the same time. And I think Kate feels the same way as well. So I'm going to bring Kate on to share her knowledge and also to read the latest comment from Stormy in the chat because it's somewhat newsy and also somewhat related. So, Kate, I'm bringing you on. What do you think of the other Kate, Kate Bishop's mom, played by Vera Farmiga? I remembered her name, but I'm probably pronouncing it.
Okay, so I think we almost touched on it last week, but I don't think we really went into it. I have a whole different view than what I think either of us have discussed. There's a lot of heavy, ominous tones around Jack, things that are being said about him and like how Kate views it. What I actually think is he is in a situation much of like he has power, but he's not the most wise or self-cracking kind of guy. I think he's supposed to be red herring, and who I think is actually the evil is her mom. I think she is using him and his accounts and his position, much like a Moira Queen action would do. So a lot of the events that are happening remind me of season 1 and 2 of Arrow. There is this secret, a higher power of like financial authority making some moves in the background, and we're trying to figure out who it is. And much like how Moira always did all these things in its attempt to protect Oliver, and it really kind of came down to being really seedy and mildly villainous and hurtful to other people. I think that's kind of where Eleanor is coming from too, where all of her actions are meant to protect her daughter, but in the long run, she's put her daughter in jeopardy.
And that certainly makes a lot of sense. And I can see that too. And interestingly enough, I think the character of Eleanor has a lot in common with Kate Kane's dad, going back to Batwoman. He sort of had like a similar kind of role in terms of being a person who was running an organization that was supposed to be about law enforcement and justice and that sort of thing. And it ended up being corrupted. And in that case, it was sort of corrupted from within without him. And to a degree, I think her organization or her entity might be corrupted, but it probably is because of her, and it may very well be for altruistic reasons, but I think the results might very well still be the same.
Yeah. Okay, so I was also told to read Stormy's comments. So Stormy said, I will watch Mia clips on YouTube. Haven't watched anything Arrowverse since Arrow ended. I have little hope Mia will be written like the way she was on Arrow. Flash writers suck at writing Arrow people. Or I'm saying. I don't have a Disney Plus, so I'm bummed to miss Kate and Yelena. I think is that the girl from Black Widow? I haven't seen Black Widow yet. Okay. And then I haven't seen it yet. And then it's cool. Charlie Cox will be Daredevil in Marvel if he shows up, minus the Iron Fist actor. I liked all the cast of the Marvel Netflix shows. You seemed a little shocked, Carey.
This is the
I am.
That's the creepiest thing.
This whole the big deal at the end of the big deal at the end of episode 4 was the Black Widow movie payoff, and without that sort of frame of reference, it's sort of like, hey, everybody else in the theater is screaming, right, and everyone else is like, huh, that's strange.
First of all, this is the all-seeing Cammie in the sky. I'm just appearing because this is the only way to get a third video feed in. And I just have to say, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the screen. I can't take this seriously. I just have to say that the end of Black Widow, where they're threatening to kill Hawkeye, I was okay with it then, and I'm still okay with it now. Okay, that's all. Cammie's going away.
Okay, so I haven't actually seen the movie, but I have seen that clip, so I have that frame of reference. I also know who Florence Pugh's character is. I just didn't get a chance to watch it when it was in theaters, and I still haven't taken the time to watch it now that's on Disney Plus. I understood it enough, and actually when they started fighting on the rooftop, I immediately knew who it was before it was revealed, but I can understand the shock again.
I guess what will be revealing, and we'll probably see more of it in the next episode, is obviously going back to something that Clint mentioned earlier in the episode, was that one of his first assignments, I suspect, was going to kill Black Widow, and ultimately he did not. And now you have this situation where Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, and I forget her name, Valentina, I believe is her name, is the one who sent Yelena essentially after Clint. And you have to sort of wonder, in terms of Clint being sent to kill Black Widow initially and didn't do it, and then ultimately years and years and years and years later, her death occurs, and I don't know if it's essentially everyone in the world know how he died. Will those two things get mixed as it relates to essentially the message or the mission that Yelena got in terms of going after Clint? Will that get confused? Does she know that they became friends, like really, really deep and close friends, or is it just, hey, this is just a guy, and I have no idea what their relationship was. I just know that someone said he killed her.
Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting here is like I joked then and I continue to joke now about the fact that like I'm okay with people going after Hawkeye, like fine, whatever. But more generally, it's that they set up a premise I felt at the end of Black Widow 2 where it would be like I would be able to empathize with Yelena if she chooses to go after Hawkeye, having some sort of, even if she has some general understanding that like it was his life or her life, and Natasha chose that, whatever. Even taking all that into consideration, I empathize with, minor misunderstandings that would have her blame him, or just in a macro sense, she blames him for not making a different choice or something like that. And I'm interested to see in a show like Hawkeye how they are able to represent that, where like Hawkeye feels a little bit more just ever so slightly geared to a younger audience. There's a little bit less, I guess, darkness in comparison to like Falcon and Winter Soldier, or even in comparison to WandaVision. Like you do get the same sort of kind of lightness, commitment to a theme, etc. But it's just not so far. There's not quite as much, I guess, like death and depressing content, for lack of a better way to say it. And I'm therefore wondering if they're going to be able to balance these two things of, having empathy on both sides of the two forces that are going to come together.
Well, obviously the likeness comes from the fact that it's a Marvel Christmas story is
Right.
what we have, right? So obviously you have that, and it seems like it would certainly drag down the Christmas spirit if we're talking about the fact that I must avenge my dead sister by killing the star of the show.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that is her motivation, and it's incredibly well understood. I mean, who wouldn't do that, right? So
Right.
finding a way to balance that. I think they found moments to have fun and to offer some of those more deeper moments, particularly whenever there's an instance when Natasha, her memories brought up. Obviously, we know that that still hurts and stings for Clint. So I think they'll find a good way to balance it. But when they are able to confront each other, when they both fully know and understand each other's story as it relates to Natasha, I don't even know that it has to be fisticuffs for that to be incredibly deep and emotional and impactful for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how they balance that and do that.
I agree. And there's not like it's not like there's that many episodes left for them to do it.
Right.
And as Kate had just mentioned, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, Kate, you were mentioning that you felt that some of the episodes are almost too short.
Yeah, so the first two were like their normal hour long, so the premiere was 2 hours, but then this third episode was 30 minutes long, and this was 40 minutes. So it's kind of taking advantage of that. It can have whatever playtime it wants, that we talked about even in WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know why they went with such a short time on the last one. But I'm kind of looking at these next two episodes and still thinking we only at max have 2 hours left. Mm-hmm. And knowing that and seeing where the direction that they're going in, and especially since they had Kate realize, you get to see how perceptive Kate is in a surprising way. Like, she doesn't come off that way, but her realizing pretty early on actually that he's Ronin, and very much understanding exactly why. She's a very emotionally adept person, for somebody who in her position. And because of that, I think we're going to get a very accelerated story with Yelena. I think we're going to get, it's going to probably feel like a bit of a cop out, to be honest. I think they should have actually brought her in earlier, but they're probably going to have her very quickly understand, oh, he's not the villain. Like, we're not on the opposite ends. The people that are trying to oppose us are on opposite ends, or something more like that is kind of where I see this whole thing going. It's, I think they really went this way of having Yelena initially want to kill him because he's the closest in for her to get into the more core Avengers team for then her to continue on and fulfill that role. Same with Kate. So this is kind of bringing these four characters, Natasha included, and all into this one focal point, so we can kind of switch out the characters and the roles for the rest of the show, the movies and shows, as just a technical point, but then as like an actual character piece. It, for as little bit of I saw as Yelena, I would have to assume that she has some amount of just basic comprehension skill, as Natasha would have had, to understand, okay, I've been lied to. Let me just pause and think. If Natasha trusted this guy for so many years, he earns some amount of regard. Same way with like this woman approaches me and tells me that he's bad. There's so much like gaps that she has to fill in that once it's kind of revealed, hey, there's another story here. I think that's going to be how it kind of resolves that part of the story, and we're going to go after whoever's in charge of Maya and whoever is kind of funneling the money into that project is the final climax of this story.
The big boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really fair, like, combination of prediction and analysis. And speaking of the big boss, do you want to know why, with my last two brain cells, I think Kate Bishop's mom is a villain?
Why?
Because she is consistently wearing the same dark shade of red in her clothing, no matter what clothing style she's wearing, whether it was like the charity event thing or whether it's just like lounging at home. They consistently give her this like dark shade of red. And that doesn't tell me she's a villain, because there are some Marvel or DC heroes that, you know, wear red. It is because she has the same shade that she's wearing over and over that tells me she is a comic book character, that she has an identity. Whenever a comic book character is not portrayed in like hero or villain suit, but is consistently wearing a certain character, Thea wearing yellow, Black Canary wearing like blue, like that kind of stuff, it's just like telling you that they're going to be a certain character. And in my brain, I don't know who that is because I don't know who like the Marvel lore, but I know that she's a comic book character and she's not giving me the signs of being an undercover hero. So I have to believe that she is an undercover villain.
Mm-hmm.
Stormy asks a question.
That.
She says, do you think Kingpin is the big boss on Hawkeye? What do you think of that? Do you think Kingpin's the big boss on Hawkeye? I'll bring Carey on to answer that too.
I don't know who Kingpin is.
I think all the signs point to Kingpin being the big boss. I'm not like a big comics guy. However, what I do understand from the comics is he has a very close association with Echo. And obviously, I think in the most previous episode, I think there was sort of an allusion to someone that she was with, a fairly big person, which would have fit Kingpin's persona. And so I think he is probably the big boss behind this. I just don't know if we will see him with two episodes to go. But I think if you just sort of draw like the normal lines, it feels like it would be him. But of course, it wouldn't be beyond Marvel to sort of like try to play around with everyone's expectations and subvert them somehow.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to throw a twist or two in the last two episodes. I just didn't. I've never heard of Kingpin. I don't know who that is.
He's more commonly a Spider-Man villain. Obviously, he was featured in the Netflix Marvel shows. I don't know if you saw. Did you see Into the Spider-Verse, the animated Spider-Man movie? He was the
No, I
villain
haven't watched it
there.
yet.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm assuming you're familiar with the character name and that sort of thing. I'm assuming,
Yeah, I've heard
or
of the name. I just don't know who
okay,
it is.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it just seems like and feels like that's probably where they're going to go. We'll obviously see. Actually, there's one thing I wanted to ask you about, or at least wanted to mention when you were talking about Elena and Clint getting to a point where obviously both of them see and realize and understand that they're not each other's enemy. And I'm just wondering if Hawkeye will pull the same sort of maneuver that it pulled with Captain America Civil War, when basically you would have assumed and thought that Tony and Steve would have said, you know what, we're not each other's enemies. But it got to a point that it was so emotional and so personal for Tony that he didn't care. And I'm just wondering if Yelena could say, you know what, I know you didn't kill her, but you also didn't save her. And that might still be enough for her to hold a to sort of seek vengeance against him. What are your thoughts?
I mean, there is a room for that is a possibility. I don't know enough about her personality to say that it fit her personality. I think that really fit with Tony versus Captain America because of their like leader personalities and ambitions. But I couldn't say whether yes or no. I think these particular people would do that.
It will certainly be interesting. There's something here's I had another question I wanted to ask. So I'm not one of those folks who digs into a whole lot of things, but they made a big deal about this watch from the Avengers compound, and I was sort of just scratching my head. Who could that watch belong to, and what sort of information could it hold that has Hawkeye so worried? I know it's. I don't feel like it's the watch that Tony would have wore that had like his nanotech for his suit in it. I just don't know whose watch it could be. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that.
I do not. Let me bring Kate back on to see if Kate does.
I the only thought I had, and I've looked it up and did like a one search, but I really didn't read into it that much. The only thought I had was it's actually his wife's, or somebody his wife is connected to, because I don't know. I can't even remember really in the MCU what her history is with any connection of assassin work or anything like that. But I would assume how comfortable she is talking about it and how much she does get involved, that she herself has some history with it. So maybe it's actually a connection with her or how he met her and got involved with that. I don't know exactly. Like you said, I don't think it's anything Iron Man related or any of the characters that we've commonly seen. The only character that I for a moment thought of that could be him was Captain America because it's a vintage watch, but it doesn't make sense either. Same with Bill Coulson, like he likes vintage watches, but again, none of those connections. I don't have enough like context to make that a strong argument for them to their watch.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's an interesting point about Clint's wife. We don't know much of anything about her, but we have to assume that either they met before he went on his avenging trip or they met during. And what we do know is that when he needed a key piece of information, he relied upon her to find it out. That's not necessarily just sort of like housewife stuff, you know what I mean? So it'll be
She
interesting
seemed
if
to
they
have
dig
almost
deeper.
like tech skills.
Yeah,
she also, when she was talking on the phone to him, was like using kind of veiled coded language that was indicative of them being like married for a while and knowing how to talk without like giving things away, but
yeah,
also
she spoke
was just like
Russian.
a little agenty, right?
Yeah, and she spoke Russian.
Yeah, I found that really
Yeah,
interesting. I like her a lot, by the way.
it's yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she's been really cool, and I've really appreciated like the way they blended in the fact that he's married and he has kids while still having this whole like adventure via the whole fighting to be home for Christmas. I like the way they have kind of my cat is trying to climb the chair I'm on right now. He is going buck wild tonight. I like the way they had his son's phone call and Kate kind of having to translate that. So it kind of brings her into things, even though his family doesn't know her. There's just been some really like thoughtful, seamless choices there that I've enjoyed quite a bit.
yeah. What was also interesting was the fact that Echo had that dossier essentially on Clinton and his family, and that sort of ratchets everything up. And so, what will be interesting again, based on what we know or what we've seen glimpses of from Clint's wife, it's like, okay, Echo has sort of zeroed in on Clint's family. It will be interesting to see how Clint's family, particularly his wife, reacts and responds, and maybe she gets called into action somehow.
Yeah. I hope she does get to I hope there is sort of a moment where his whole family is brought in, but again, not in a tragic way. I know we talked about that a little bit
Right.
last week. I don't want tragedy at the end of this. And having watched what I've watched so far, I also don't expect tragedy at the end of this, but I could be so wrong. Kate, what do you think? Do you expect tragedy at the end of this?
So I, hmm, I'm not going to say that there's not going to be any tragedy, but I do kind of agree with you that I think they're going to go light on the pain and problems in this show, and to also kind of fill in the connections with, I think her name is Linda or Laura maybe, the wife.
The wife? I think it's Laura.
For a character, okay, the for the amount that she had not been present in the MCU previously, she's still not a main character in this show by any means.
Mhm.
But they are making a concerted effort for her to have to be his contact because in the way she's being used so far, she could have been replaced by any nameless, faceless, like contact, and he could have been doing the same thing. But
Mhm.
by making sure that we see that she is his contact, she has at least some obvious spy skills. I wonder if she's going to be more involved, or at least kind of prove to be a formidable proponent, like formidable defender of her children, if that so passes, if they come and are attacked or anything like that. If we see this little bit of setup of, hey, she has a secret past too, and now she's able to defend her family and her kids and herself when somebody comes into her house, which is a unexpected factor when these people come and attack them. That would be a really fun scene for how it's sad and scary the context of what's going on would be.
Mhm.
Much like how in other shows we've seen that before too, where the not the main character has enough skills to protect themselves, and that causes a little bit of a surprise for the villain.
Mhm. Well, Kate, speaking of the main character having enough skills to defend themselves and others, Barry Allen does not. But he sure, tried to lead the crossover this week. Anyways, I would wager to say that this was actually the first real crossover week we even had. And I know we've spent a lot of this hour talking about Hawkeye, and there's good reason for that. That's because I didn't actually love this week's episode of The Flash, but I really, really wanted to. And there were some really bright and shining moments. such as the introductory fight with all of my faves, Alex and just everything. I loved some of the fights, but the storyline itself had me groaning. Carey, am I a Scrooge? Tell me what you liked this week on The Flash.
I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but I think you are a Scrooge. I thought the best thing, in my opinion, about this episode was it was a it was an episode about Barry Allen, but in my opinion, Barry Allen wasn't so much at the center of it. It was about basically either, and I know I'm not expressing this well, but it was sort of about his character, his persona, but it wasn't about physically Barry Allen. It was about it was more than anything. It was about Thawne obviously supplanting him and taking everything that should be good about Barry Allen, and sort of turning it on its head in a lot of ways. Particularly how he ran Team Flash, and when I say he, I'm talking about Eobard. In many of the ways that he ran Team Flash, is light years better than the way that Barry Allen has ever run Team Flash. And I think I joked with someone that said basically, outside of the killings, he was a pretty formidable leader. And of course, if you look at any leader of any hero team, I mean, they have been responsible for some death as well. So it's sort of semantics, right? It's kind of sort of like, what was your intention and what was the result? And the result there's been death, but it's just the only difference is what the intention was. So to wrap that all up to say, I thought that obviously the way that they incorporated, particularly Batwoman and Iris, I really liked that pairing a great deal. I even liked the sort of like, I guess, B or C plot, if you want to call it, with Allegra, with Chester is his name, and with Ryan Choi. I thought they were like a fun group together. I'll be honest, the only two that I sort of didn't like were Frost and Chill Lame, which is what I will call him forevermore. Thank you, Damien Dark. But I just like the way that this episode flowed. It seemed to have like a good energy to it. And so, yeah, I liked it, and you obviously did not. What sort of like drug it down for you?
There were a few things that brought this down, and they all fall under the heading of the pairings. And I don't mean that in a romantic sense. I actually thought, the romantic pairings this episode all made sense. So Allegra and Chuck, it makes sense. They're very cheesy. They're supposed to be very nerdy, whatever. There's like classic Disney Channel original movie level miscommunication between them, but that romance made sense. Ryan Choi as the like jaded best friend, it made sense. The references at the like wedding rehearsal thing to other people's happy romantic lives, whether that be Batwoman, whether that be Killer Frost and Chillblaine, banging in the bathroom, whatever. All of that made sense. It all felt very typical, and while cheesy, it was nice and funny for a crossover. Likewise, this whole thing of reverse Eobard, Reverse Flash has stolen your identity, and with that, he has also stolen your wife, your sister, girlfriend, like your whole thing, right? With that, it also made sense, and I enjoyed seeing that because that was a really fun and interesting, pairing. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I actually thought within this context for Eobard that he was not just stealing Iris to get at Barry, but that he actually also cared for Iris, fell in love with Iris. And I like seeing villains have romantic feelings for a good person. I think that's very fun. I think that's very interesting. That can kind of tug at your heartstrings in kind of an interesting way. So the pairings romantically were fine. The pairings in terms of scene partners were not great. And the A plot version of that was Barry and Damien Dark. I happen to like Damien Dark as a villain. We know him from Arrow. I saw some of, I thought some of his scenes with, for example, Felicity, because he was a villain that was kind of almost catered specifically for Felicity on Arrow, because he was like the techie, whatever. I thought he was good. In this, a lot of his scenes with Barry were very, very cheesy. And I don't think it was the fault necessarily of each of the characters individually, but the fact that they didn't mesh well together. So he's supposed to be very stoic, and he has this very like menacing and mesmerizing gaze. And Barry plays things very goofy. He plays things very like haphazard, and like he's sort of impromptu lying, and the two did not mesh. And then when they brought in Killer Frost and Chilblain, and I love Killer Frost, by the way, I really do, but when they brought in Frost and Chilblain to fight him, that scene was just so awkward, and like the chemistry was very, very off between the villain ish Damien Dark in this and Killer Frost and Chilblain. The moments where we see Eobard and Iris, and it's kind of it's darkly romantic, but it also feels wrong because she's supposed to be with Barry, blah blah blah. That is fine, but then when we bring in Barry there towards the end, again it felt awkward. It's like that you're waiting for Iris to shoot Eobard, but everything about it kind of feels wrong because they haven't quite set up why she fell in love with him and why she fell out of love with him, and the scene with Batwoman wasn't enough. So it's just like all of the dialogue is off while I want to believe in the love.
No, that absolutely makes a whole lot of sense, because I was thinking about that too, because it would have been nice if they had somehow figured out a way to condense episode 2 and 3 and put those together. And with this sort of episode, this reverse flashpoint, if they had spent a little more time, because I was thinking the entire time, I'm like, okay, how did Eobard approach Iris and get to a point where they became a romantic pair? And I was sort of like, I mean, we know sort of like why Barry and Iris did, but I'm thinking just because you took the Flash's place, it's not like you grew up with her. It's not like you guys had that sort of lifelong connection. So how did that love happen? And I think if we had learned more about that, I think sort of the turning of why she, like you said, why she was starting to doubt that or question that, if we had had a little bit more of that, I think that might have been an easier narrative to follow.
If they had told us, if they had specifically come out and told us that Eobard also fell in love with Iris, I think that would added a really interesting level of like dark romance to this. And then if they had in some way indicated that he was using magic or some kind of mind control to make her love him back, that she was under some kind of spell, that would have made it a little bit more believable, or even just shown her in a better light when she, kind of breaks free and shoots Eobard. It would show that, somehow proximity to Barry is somehow, she's able to kind of break through the spell. But without spelling that out, we're led to believe that in this universe, she and Eobard fall for each other. So immediately that's it's putting their characters into question. And I'm giving them both the benefit of the doubt and saying, he did love her and she did love him, and it wasn't just, I don't know, because otherwise it doesn't make sense for Iris's character, right? Iris is a very discerning character. For her to love somebody, they must be good. Even when she's loved like Eddie and so on, she loves good people, or so, or so we're told. I believe Barry's a villain, but I'm alone on that little rock. Then for her to go from being about to marry this man to shooting him, we just needed a lot more than one little conversation with Batwoman about getting cold feet. I'm sorry, that was not sufficient. We needed to see some sort of either discernment breaking through, or we needed to specifically be told that she was under some kind of romance spell. Otherwise, I don't want to say it doesn't add up. It's just it paints her in a very bad light, and I'm particularly sensitive to them painting Iris in a bad light because I think that they've really struggled to write her and her romantic journey in a way that is fair to her. And this was it was once again propping Barry up and showing, he can immediately waltz in as a villain and put people back under his little spell. It's propping him back up at the sake of putting her down.
The only defense to that I will even try to muster is that no matter how you feel about it, Barry is supposed to be this paragon of love, right? That's supposed to mean something, right? So if he comes and he expresses that love to Iris, that's supposed to mean something. That's supposed to be what jogs her out. And since this show has always been so much about love, I have to assume and imagine people that have stuck with it and been part of this show for this entirety, that has to have meant something to them. And so maybe the writers said, you know what, maybe that's enough. I don't think it was, but maybe they were banking on that being enough. And I want one other thing, going back to the awkwardness you mentioned between Dark and Barry as Reverse Flash, and it certainly was the only thing that made it palatable for me and made it interesting for me is because during a season of Legends of Tomorrow, I think it was like fourth or fifth season, I can't remember which one, but Eobard, Damien Dark, and Merlin formed their very own Legion of Doom. And they were actually a fantastic trio of villains for the show because they had menace, they had charm, and they were incredibly capable, right? So I say all that to say that there was a rapport that that Dark had with Reverse Flash, and it was just sort of interesting to see sort of that playing off, particularly when we could really see that Damien Dark was realizing that this version of quote unquote Reverse Flash, it basically paled in comparison to what the quote unquote Reverse Flash should have been. So it was just fun to see that play out for me personally, being a fan of Legends of Tomorrow. I can understand how people who weren't or did not see that could just be like, kind of, this just doesn't seem to sort of connect.
I actually watched either, an episode or a part of a season of Legends that involved the Legion of Doom, and I did enjoy that. And I think that's one of the things that's coming to mind when I say, like, we see these initial scenes of Barry going to Damien Dark as Eobard, and it's not just that it's awkward because it's Barry, it's awkward because these are not good scene partners. This is not a good pair up. I've really enjoyed seeing, for example, Oliver and Malcolm Merlyn pair up from time to time. I know that got really annoying to some people that Malcolm Merlyn kept coming back, that Malcolm Merlyn kept being, forgiven and, returning from the dead and whatever. But the fact remains that the reason why they kept doing these sort of nonsensical things was because Malcolm Merlyn could show up and have great, hero villain or anti-hero hero or, whatever chemistry with Oliver, with Thea, with Felicity, with Diggle, with everybody that he played opposite of. It was really good. And Damien and Barry, you could see they were trying to do that and it didn't work. And it wasn't just Barry that it didn't work with. It was just Barry that it showed the most. I'm looking in the chat, by the way. There's some really good conversation. Stormy agrees with you. She says, I've never found Barry to be a leader. And this is in reference to your comments about Eobard being an interesting leader of Team Flash. She says, in crossovers, it was Oliver, and on Flash itself, it felt leaderless. That's a good point. She says, because I don't watch, is Joe really dead, or is it another messed up timeline? I know the actor had health problems last few seasons, so he was not available to film. He is not dead. He was just not present for the crossover. This episode, spoilers, actually ends with a phone call between Barry and Joe. You don't see or hear Joe, but he is revealed to be alive and well because they changed the timeline once again, because the thing that Barry has done before, which is create a flashpoint, is done by somebody else, but when it's done by somebody else, it's villainous, whereas when it's done by Barry, it is heroic, even though it was for the exact same reason. It was done by somebody else to retain a certain identity and get the girl, and Barry has done the exact same thing for the exact same reason. Kate and Stormy are also of the belief that Barry's a villain. I don't know. We are a trio of dissenters, I guess.
I'm trying to think. There might be one or two things that I sort of want to make a point about,
Go ahead.
and I'm one of them might be escaping me right now. Oh, here it is. So, and I don't have any insight. This may not be neither here nor there, but the fact that physically Jesse Martin, the actor, hasn't been here for the first handful of episodes, it tells me that there might be something. It's either like he just couldn't make the commitment to be there. There might be a physical issue or something. But it's like at the end of this episode when he realizes that Joe is there. Why wasn't Joe like walking into the door? You know what I mean? The fact that he's physically not there, it just seems kind of strange. And I know sort of why the first couple episodes, because they sort of wanted to play along this mystery. But this episode, the fact that the whole thing that supposedly sends Barry or starts Barry down this terrible path to Armageddon is Joe's death. And then you come back and you find out that Joe's alive, but you don't see him on screen. That's strange.
It's very strange. And what makes it stranger is that this is not the first time the show has done that. We had a whole episode questioning whether or not Iris was pregnant, and multiple phone calls to her, and she was never there and was not revealed to be there, and at no point was even her voice or a slight soundbite included. And this is the second time the show has done that, and it's just kind of strange. I don't know if they are having problems getting their actors under sufficient contracts to be there. I don't know if, I don't know what it is. And my default is always to, blame the powers that be, not the employees. So I'm sure the actors are all wonderful, lovely, doing their best and are doing everything they're under contract for. And that, whoever was supposed to get them for that time to at least do the little voice clip at the end of this episode, did not do what they needed to do. But I very much look forward to seeing Joe back.
All right. Can I ask you sort of one last thing? And I don't know if it's a question, but I'm just want to throw it out there. So obviously, it looks like Armageddon is setting up this last conflict between Barry and Eobard Thawne. Do you think the show has the guts, or do you think the show needs to finally come to some significant resolution between these two that ends their stalemate? Because and I love Eobard Thawne's character. I love Tom Cavanaugh as that character. It just seems like he's like Freddy. He won't die. He won't go away. He just sort of always pops up, and it gets to a point where it almost becomes exasperating. How do you feel, or how do you think this confrontation is going to end?
I don't think it will end with Eobard gone for good, because he's sort of the Malcolm Merlyn of this show. There is no ultimately killing him, and they're not invested in ultimately killing him because he's one of, Tom Cavanaugh is certainly one of the best actors who's been on this show. That's high praise coming from me. I don't even, I don't want to praise men, but unfortunately he's great. And, especially by standards of this show. So they, while they could continue to bring through, a bunch of clones of him, just like they had all the Welleses before and so on, I think they know he plays a good menacing villain. So even if Eobard is defeated, even if he appears to be completely disintegrated, I think they will jump at the chance to bring him back. I think he'll be defeated for the sake of this crossover, but there will always be other timelines, other versions, other clones or whatever just hanging in their back pocket to bring back, because even though it's cliche, it's still like their best cliche they have to offer.
Yeah.
Kate in the chat says, if this is correctly written, Mia is going to eviscerate Barry. For all intents and purposes, they try to make it look like Mia pulls a knife on Barry in the promo, which is lovely. There's a bunch of other chat, and I know we're already over time, so I don't want to, go through and read all of that. But if anybody's watching this after the fact, go ahead and take a look at some really good thoughts Kate and Stormy have in the chat. And for now, I want to bring Kate back on. And Carey, I know we're a little over time, but I want to give you 30 seconds to convince Kate to watch next week with us. And I'm going to return to being Cammie, the all-seeing Cammie in the sky, just so I can, hang out and laugh. Okay. I'm back to being the all-seeing Cammie in the sky.
I don't need full 30 seconds to tell you why to watch this next episode. It's the conclusion, and we get Mia Smoke. The question I have is this Mia Smoke traveling to 2021, or somehow are we getting back to 2031? Don't know, but she'll be there. That's every reason to watch.
It's a pretty big reason to watch. I'll give it to you. I really am curious which version they're going to pull, because there's 4 different timelines, I think, where she's existing already. It does make me nervous because we have a history of poor writing when we're translating an Arrow character to a Flash character, but we'll see. I might watch at least part of it. I don't think I can go back and watch the whole thing, though.
One of us.
No.
You come for 5 minutes, you'll stay for an hour.
That's right. Well, speaking of hour, we are at the hour. The all-seeing Cammie in the sky will go ahead and call us off, and next week we will have finished the Flash crossover, for better or for worse. Kate and Carey, thank you so much for joining me this week. Your information's in the description down below if anybody wants to go chat with you guys about Hawkeye, about the Flash crossover. If you want to come find me and tell me why I'm wrong for hating Love and the Paragon of Love, you can find me on Twitter. And otherwise, see you all same time, same place next week. Bye.